What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends comes face to face with television's most controversial host? In just 39 seconds, a single provocative question would shatter the carefully constructed facade of civil discourse and expose the true nature of a man who built his career on pushing boundaries too far. The studio lights blazed hot that evening as Robert De Niro settled into the guest chair across from Piers Morgan. The legendary actor, known for his methodical approach to everything from film roles to interviews, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his latest project. What he didn't expect was to walk into what felt more like an ambush than a conversation. Morgan leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk, the one that had become his trademark over years of baiting celebrities into uncomfortable moments. He shuffled through his notes with theatrical precision, clearly savoring what he had planned for the evening. "Robert, it's wonderful to have you here," Morgan began, his voice dripping with false warmth. "You know, I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time." De Niro nodded politely, his hands clasped in his lap. "Thank you for having me, Piers. I'm here to talk about the film, as we discussed." "Oh, we'll get to that," Morgan replied, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "But first, I think our viewers would be fascinated to hear your thoughts on some of the more, shall we say, controversial aspects of your personal life." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. De Niro's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him well could recognize the subtle tightening around his eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean," De Niro said carefully. "We agreed this would focus on my work." Morgan waved dismissively at the air between them. "Come now, Robert, you're a public figure. Surely you understand that the public has a right to know about the man behind the characters." "The public knows what they need to know through my work," De Niro responded, his voice steady but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "But that's where you're wrong," Morgan continued, leaning forward like a predator sensing weakness. "The public wants authenticity. They want to see the real Robert De Niro, not just another carefully managed celebrity appearance." De Niro shifted slightly in his chair. "What exactly are you getting at, Piers?" "Well, for instance," Morgan said, consulting his notes again with exaggerated care, "there have been some rather interesting reports about your behavior on set. Stories about temper tantrums, difficult behavior with directors, that sort of thing." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. De Niro's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Those are unfounded rumors," he said quietly. "Anyone I've worked with will tell you I'm a professional." "Ah, but see, that's not entirely true, is it?" Morgan pressed on, clearly enjoying himself. "I have it on good authority that you've had some rather explosive disagreements with several directors over the years." "Good authority from whom?" De Niro asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Morgan shrugged theatrically. "Sources close to the productions, people who were there. Surely you're not going to deny that you have a reputation for being, shall we say, intense?" "Intense about my craft, yes," De Niro replied. "That's what good actors do. We care about getting it right. But there's a difference between caring and being impossible to work with, isn't there?" Morgan continued his assault. "I mean, when multiple people from different productions tell similar stories about tantrums and walkouts, well, where there's smoke, there's usually fire." De Niro's hands, previously still in his lap, now gripped the arms of his chair. "What people? What stories? You're speaking in generalities and expecting me to defend myself against accusations you won't even specify." "Oh, I can be more specific," Morgan said with obvious relish. "What about the incident with Martin Scorsese during the filming of your last collaboration? The shouting match that reportedly lasted over an hour? That never happened," De Niro said firmly. "Martin and I have worked together for decades. We've never had anything remotely resembling a shouting match." Morgan raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Really? Because my sources paint a very different picture. They describe a man who's become increasingly difficult as he's aged. Someone who uses his legendary status to bully younger actors and directors into submission." The words hit their target. De Niro's famous composure began to crack, just slightly, but enough for the cameras to catch it. "Your sources are liars," De Niro said, his voice rising for the first time, "and you're irresponsible for repeating their lies on television." Now, Robert," Morgan said with false concern, "there's no need to get upset. I'm simply asking questions that I think our viewers deserve answers to." "Your viewers deserve the truth, not manufactured controversy," De Niro shot back. "You're not asking questions, you're making accusations based on gossip." Morgan leaned back, clearly pleased with the reaction he was getting. "I have to say, Robert, your defensive response is rather telling. If these stories were completely false, I would think you'd be able to laugh them off rather than getting so worked up about them." I'm not worked up, De Niro said, though his voice suggested otherwise. I'm offended that you would use your platform to spread malicious rumors about people. Malicious? Morgan repeated, feigning hurt. I prefer to think of it as investigative journalism. The public has a right to know who their heroes really are, don't they? The public has a right to accurate information, De Niro corrected. What you're doing isn't journalism, it's tabloid sensationalism. Morgan's smile widened. Strong words from someone who's clearly uncomfortable with scrutiny. Tell me, Robert, is this how you react when directors give you notes you don't like? Do you accuse them of sensationalism too? The question was designed to provoke, and it worked. De Niro's eyes flashed with genuine anger. This interview is over, he said, starting to remove his microphone. Oh, come now, Morgan said quickly. We've barely gotten started. Surely you're not going to walk away just because I asked a few tough questions? De Niro paused, his hand still on the microphone. Tough questions? You call spreading unverified rumors tough questions? I call holding celebrities accountable for their behavior tough questions, Morgan replied smoothly. Something that happens far too rarely in today's entertainment media. You want to hold someone accountable? De Niro said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his decades in the industry. Then hold yourself accountable for the damage you do when you present speculation as fact. Morgan's expression hardened slightly, the first crack in his confident facade. I present what my sources tell me. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should examine why so many people have such similar stories about working with you. Because they don't, De Niro said flatly. You're either making them up or your sources are. The accusation hung between them like a challenge. Morgan's smile returned, but it was colder now, more calculating. Are you calling me a liar, Robert? The question was a trap, and both men knew it. De Niro studied Morgan's face for a long moment, recognizing the game being played. I'm calling you irresponsible, he said finally. There's a difference. Is there? Morgan pressed. Because it sounds to me like you're questioning my integrity as a journalist. Your integrity as a journalist? De Niro repeated, and for the first time, there was a hint of amusement in his voice. That would assume you're actually practicing journalism. The words struck Morgan like a physical blow. His carefully constructed mask of professional composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something uglier underneath. The studio audience, which had been murmuring quietly throughout the exchange, fell completely silent. Excuse me? Morgan said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You heard me, De Niro replied calmly. What you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's entertainment disguised as news. You're more interested in creating drama than finding truth. Morgan's face flushed red. I'll have you know I've been practicing journalism for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, and some of the most important figures of our time. And how many of them did you ambush with unsubstantiated rumors? De Niro asked pointedly. How many did you try to trap with loaded questions based on anonymous sources? I asked the questions that need to be asked. Morgan shot back, his professional veneer cracking further. The questions that other interviewers are too afraid or too starstruck to ask. Or too ethical. De Niro added quietly. The comment hit its mark perfectly. Morgan's eyes narrowed dangerously. Ethical? He spat. Let me tell you about ethics, Robert. Ethics is giving the public accurate information about the people they admire. Ethics is not allowing celebrities to hide behind carefully crafted public relations campaigns. Ethics is also verifying your sources before you repeat their claims on national television, De Niro countered. Ethics is distinguishing between legitimate criticism and character assassination. Morgan leaned forward aggressively. Character assassination? Is that what you think this is? What would you call it? De Niro asked. You invite me here under the pretense of discussing my work, then spend the entire time making vague accusations based on unnamed sources. If that's not character assassination, it's at least attempted character assassination. The accusation seemed to trigger something primal in Morgan. His carefully maintained broadcaster persona completely evaporated. You know what your problem is, Robert? Morgan said, his voice rising. You think your reputation makes you untouchable. You think because you've made some good movies, you're above scrutiny. I think I deserve the same basic respect you'd show any guest, De Niro replied evenly. The same respect you'd want if someone invited you somewhere and then spent the time attacking your character. Attacking your character? Morgan laughed bitterly. I'm asking legitimate questions about your professional behavior. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Legitimate questions require legitimate sourcing, De Niro said. What you're doing is repeating gossip and presenting it as journalism. Morgan's control snapped completely. Gossip? These are credible reports from industry professionals who've worked with you, people who've seen your behavior firsthand. Name them, De Niro challenged. The simple request caught Morgan off guard. What? Name them, De Niro repeated. If these sources are so credible, if their reports are so reliable, name them. Let me respond to specific allegations from specific people. Morgan sputtered for a moment. I can't reveal my sources. That's basic journalism. Basic journalism also requires having actual sources, De Niro said with devastating calm. Not just making them up to support a narrative. The accusation hit Morgan like a slap. His face went from red to white in seconds. Are you suggesting I fabricated these reports? He asked, his voice dangerously low. I'm suggesting you have no reports, De Niro said. I think you decided to create controversy for ratings, and you're using anonymous sources as cover for your own speculation. Morgan stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. How dare you question my journalistic integrity? Your journalistic integrity? De Niro remained seated, his voice maddeningly calm. What integrity? You've spent this entire interview trying to ambush me with rumors and gossip. Where's the integrity in that? I have sources, Morgan insisted, his voice cracking slightly. Multiple sources from multiple productions. Then produce them, De Niro said simply. If your journalism is so solid, if your sources are so reliable, bring them forward. Let's have an actual conversation based on facts instead of innuendo. Morgan began pacing behind his desk, his composure completely shattered. I don't have to prove anything to you. This is my show. I ask the questions here, and I have the right to expect those questions to be based on something more substantial than your imagination, De Niro replied. The comment seemed to break something fundamental in Morgan. All pretense of professionalism abandoned, he whirled to face De Niro. My imagination? He screamed. You arrogant has-been. You think because you made a few good movies 30 years ago, you can come on my show and insult me? The outburst was so unexpected, so completely unprofessional, that even the camera operators looked stunned. De Niro, however, remained perfectly calm. 30 years ago? He said with the faintest smile. I've made several acclaimed films in just the past few years. But I suppose you'd know that if you'd actually done research instead of relying on made-up sources. Morgan's face turned purple with rage. Made-up sources? I'll show you made-up sources. I have documentation. I have recordings. I have witnesses. Then produce them, De Niro said again, his voice never rising above conversational level. Show me this documentation. Play these recordings. Bring forward these witnesses. I don't have to show you anything, Morgan snarled. This is my show, and I'll run it however I see fit. And I'm your guest, De Niro replied, which means I deserve to be treated with basic courtesy and honesty, neither of which you've shown tonight. Morgan slammed his hand down on his desk, sending papers flying. Courtesy? Honesty? You want to talk about honesty? Let's talk about your reputation in this industry. Let's talk about the real Robert De Niro. By all means, De Niro said, spreading his hands. Let's talk about facts instead of fantasy. What specifically would you like to know about my career or my conduct? The reasonable response seemed to infuriate Morgan even more. Don't patronize me, he hissed. I know what you're really like. I know how you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling. Based on what evidence? De Niro asked. Your mysterious sources who apparently can't be named, contacted, or verified? Based on years of reports from industry insiders? Morgan shouted. Based on a pattern of difficult behavior that spans decades. Show me the pattern, De Niro challenged. Give me specific examples with specific dates and specific witnesses. Show me something more substantial than your word. Morgan looked around the studio desperately, as if searching for support that wasn't coming. The crew watched in stunned silence as their host completely melted down on live television. I don't have to prove anything to you, he repeated weakly. Then you don't have anything, De Niro concluded, which means everything you've said tonight has been speculation presented as fact. That's not journalism, Piers. That's not even good entertainment. It's just sad. The final words seemed to drain all the fight out of Morgan. He stood behind his desk, breathing heavily, looking like a man who just realized he'd destroyed his own credibility in front of millions of viewers. De Niro watched Morgan's breakdown with the same intensity he brought to studying characters for his films. The legendary actor had seen enough. He stood slowly, deliberately, removing his microphone with careful precision. Where do you think you're going? Morgan demanded, his voice cracking like a teenager's. De Niro paused, holding the microphone in his hand. I'm leaving. This isn't an interview anymore. It's not even television. It's just a man having a public breakdown. You can't just walk out, Morgan said desperately. "We're live. We have millions of viewers expecting to see Robert De Niro." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to ambush your guest with fabricated stories," De Niro replied, placing the microphone on his chair. "Maybe you should have considered what would happen when you got caught." Morgan's eyes darted to the cameras, suddenly remembering they were broadcasting his humiliation to the world. "This is ridiculous. You're being completely unreasonable. All I did was ask a few questions." "No," De Niro said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect for decades. "What you did was invite me here under false pretenses, then spend 30 minutes trying to destroy my reputation with lies. That's not journalism. That's not even entertainment. It's just cruel." The word hung in the air like an indictment. Morgan's face went through a series of expressions, from anger to confusion to something that might have been shame. "I wasn't trying to be cruel," he said weakly. "I was trying to get to the truth." "Whose truth?" De Niro asked, turning back to face him fully. "The truth according to your anonymous sources who don't exist? The truth according to your imagination? Or just the truth you needed to create a controversy for ratings?" Morgan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. For the first time in the entire interview, he seemed to have no answer. "You want to know what the real truth is, Piers?" De Niro continued, his voice growing stronger. "The truth is that you built your career on moments like this, on ambushing people, on creating conflict where none existed, on turning conversations into confrontations." "That's not true," Morgan protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" De Niro asked. "How many guests have you done this to? How many people have you invited on your show just to attack them with unverified rumors and anonymous accusations?" Morgan's shoulders sagged slightly. "I ask tough questions. That's what good interviewers do." "Good interviewers ask tough questions based on facts," De Niro corrected. "They don't invent controversies out of thin air. They don't use their platform to spread gossip and call it journalism." "I didn't invent anything," Morgan said, but even he seemed to know how hollow the words sounded. De Niro smiled sadly. "Then prove it. Right now, in front of your audience, produce one piece of evidence for any claim you've made tonight. One verifiable source, one documented incident, one shred of proof that anything you've said has any basis in reality." The challenge echoed through the studio. Morgan looked around desperately, his eyes moving from camera to camera, as if seeking an escape route that didn't exist. "I can't reveal my sources on live television," he said finally, "because they don't exist," De Niro concluded. "And you know it. And now your audience knows it too." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the studio crew seemed frozen, unsure how to handle what they were witnessing. Morgan made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Look, Robert, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over? Talk about your new project like we originally planned." De Niro shook his head slowly. "You don't get to do that, Piers. You don't get to spend half an hour trying to destroy someone's reputation and then suggest we start over when it backfires." "I wasn't trying to destroy anything," Morgan insisted. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" De Niro's voice rose for the first time, not in anger, but in genuine disbelief. "Your job is to inform and entertain your audience, not to spread lies about your guests. Your job is to conduct interviews, not to stage ambushes." Morgan's face flushed again. "I don't have to take this from you. This is my show." "Yes, it is your show," De Niro agreed. "And you just destroyed it. You took whatever credibility you had left and threw it away for 30 minutes of manufactured drama." The words hit Morgan like physical blows. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white with tension. "You can't talk to me like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can talk to you exactly like this," De Niro replied. "Because everything I've said is true and you know it. The only difference between us right now is that I'm telling the truth, and you've been lying from the moment I sat down." Morgan's composure finally cracked completely. "Get out," he said, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "Just get out of here." De Niro nodded calmly. "I was already leaving, but thank you for making it official." He started toward the exit, then paused and turned back one final time. "You know what's really sad about this, Piers? You're actually a capable interviewer when you want to be. You've had some genuinely good conversations with interesting people, but you throw it all away for moments like this. For cheap controversy and manufactured conflict." Morgan said nothing, standing behind his desk like a man who'd just watched his career implode. "The tragedy is that you don't even need to do this," De Niro continued. "You could have had a perfectly good interview tonight just by treating your guest with basic respect. Instead, you chose to gamble your credibility on lies, and you lost. With that, Robert De Niro walked off the set, leaving behind a host whose reputation would never recover from the 39 seconds it took for his lies to unravel. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of Morgan's complete humiliation as he stood alone in his studio, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before someone finally had the mercy to cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In front of millions of viewers, one of Hollywood's most respected actors had exposed one of television's most controversial hosts as exactly what many had suspected him to be all along: a man willing to sacrifice truth, integrity, and basic human decency for the sake of ratings. The real Robert De Niro had indeed been revealed that night, just not in the way Morgan had planned. What the audience saw was a man of principle, someone who refused to be bullied or manipulated, someone who stood up for truth in the face of manufactured controversy. And in doing so, he had revealed something about Morgan too, that behind all the bluster and bravado was simply a desperate man willing to destroy others to build himself up. The interview was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come.